We are so glad you could join us online today. Our next experience will begin in just a few minutes, so sit back and enjoy.
I love having Brian here. So would you guys give Brian a warm welcome as he comes today? Good to see you. And we're just going to talk a little bit. I just wanted to really have you're good. I just wanted to have a conversation today. I love moments like this. And actually, in December, I'm going to bring the whole entire staff up here. And I want you to see who they are and what they do and their hearts behind our church as we grow. A lot of you may not even know who our staff is and what their roles are, and we want to communicate that with you so you can be better knowledgeable of what we do. And so today, we just want to have a conversation with you. We found out in the first service that 35 minutes goes very quick when you're talking candidly about a subject and about this subject when it comes to hoarding. Hoarding actually brings on the mentality of broke thinking. We think we're broke because we feel that we don't have. Living in the land of lack, living in the land of what ifs. What if this happens, then I won't have this. And therefore, we tend to grasp and hold on to this. And if you want, you can share any more information. I will say this, he actually has an upcoming book called Mastering Mindset. And because this is something that he's very skilled in, is being able to, understand scientifically the way the brain works. And that's what I want him to share today. You need to understand that this type of thinking is not just for Christians. This is for everybody in the world that comes and listens to speakers like Brian, all over the world, not just in America, but everywhere, that want to know how to become better people in their thinking when it comes to finances, number one. I'm not talking about giving today and giving to the church. I want you to just ease your mind. We're not asking you to give any more to the church. This is not what this is about. This is literally about how we hold on to things, which causes us not to be givers in general. So would you share just a little bit of you and if there's anything that you want to share and what you do actually?
Well, I just want to be clear that even though I do speak in churches and am ordained, et cetera, what I do out there in the real world is secular, right? So the things that we're going to talk about today are very, very biblically sound. These are all biblical principles. They're principles that I teach out there in the secular world, and the secular world eats it up, right? When business people hire me to come in and speak, this is the stuff. This is one of the subjects that I talk about, and they don't even know that they're being taught biblical principles, right? But the truth of the Bible is still the truth of the Bible, right? The truth is sweet to the ear, and so even in a business setting, people want to be taught these types of things. And so I've done almost 30 years of research about the human brain and what is it that causes one person to have success where another person does not. And without going into a 3-hour teaching about this, I'll kind of boil it down real simple, real quick, and then we can just keep talking about it. And that is, the things that we routinely think develop what they call neuropathways in the brain. So a neuropathway is just a fancy way of saying a path, right? If we all think of our front lawns, if we walked from our front door out to the mailbox on the exact same path every day, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over time, what would happen to the grass? Tell me. It would get worn out, right? Yep. And there would be a visible path, right? Well, the same thing happens in our mind. If we tend to think the same way over and over and over, it creates a narrow pathway that causes us to continue to think that way. And so really what we're kind of breaking down is the idea of us moving away from having a lack mentality and instead having an abundance mentality, which part of that is giving instead of hoarding.
Yeah. And I mean, Proverbs actually says that as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. How we think about ourselves is what we become. I talk about this in relationships all the time, of how you think about another person is how you begin to treat that other person. Even if you know nothing about them, somebody tells you something negative about them, you begin to treat them in a negative way, even though you don't know that, because that's what you've been thinking about. This happens all the time in marriages. You know, we start thinking about what they're doing. We start assuming, and so we start treating them a certain way, and it causes a lot of problems. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to our finances and when it comes to the money that we have. We have this mentality that we don't have. We begin to compare with others. And I want to read to you just in the beginning of James, because I'm going to ask Brian a few questions of some things that we talked about, and how all this came about was Brian's in our group. We're doing some group leaders, and they kind of get a little bit, they get to hear my message before my message sometimes. And I started sharing about that we were going to talk about hoarding. And, well, he kind of lit up because this is what he does. And then when he began to speak, everyone in the group began to light up, because this was something that everybody deals with and they want to know. Actually, let me ask you this question. How many of you would like to know more about this subject, like on an off night, like if Brian came back and was to speak a couple classes on the thinking? How many of you would like that? Brian's hands up. Yeah. So in January, I have actually asked him if we see that there's a lot of people that would love to know more about this, that he would come in and do a 2-day class. What he normally does in 2 days, we're actually just bringing into 30 minutes. And so
it's like a movie trailer.
Yeah, it's a movie trailer, exactly. But what he could do is he can come out and teach 2 one-hour sessions, one on one Sunday or whatever day we choose, and then the next week, to really give you more of what he does and help us change our thinking. That's what this is about today. We want to help people not have a broke mentality. And sometimes we don't even realize we have this, but it's because, tell me a little bit. Well, let me show you what James says. James 5:1. This is the brother of Jesus, by the way. Remember, we're a church of grace and a church of grace and. So I'm going to give you truth, what the brother of Jesus says, and you have grace for me. Because I'm not the one saying it. James is the one that says it. And he starts out in James 5:1. He says, now listen, you rich people. The CEV says, you rich people should weep and cry. The NCV says, you rich people, listen, with an exclamation point. The Message version says, I have a final word to you, arrogant rich. I think James is a little hacked off right now at the people that think they're rich. Now, if some of you are sitting in here and, whoo, man, thank God, because I am not rich. Well, guess what? If you've been at this church longer than 6 months, you've heard me say that if you make $35,000 a year or more, you are in the top 1% of the people in this world. We are rich. We just don't feel it. We don't feel it because we live beyond our means. We don't create margin in our life. You even talked about if you have an automatic vehicle with air conditioner.
Yeah, you know, we hear stuff like that, and just like Pastor Jason said, we go, "Oh, good. I'm glad he's not talking about me," right? But the fact of the matter is, we are rich. When you look at the whole rest of the world, I always tell people, if you have a car that has automatic transmission and air conditioning, you're rich, right? Yeah. Like when I travel internationally, whether it's India, Vietnam, I mean, there's a bunch of other countries that I've been to that are poor, and you'll see, I'm not kidding you, you'll routinely see an entire family of 4. Dad, mom, and 2 kids. I think I've even seen 5, but for sure I've seen a bunch with 4 people on a scooter. Just one scooter with 4 humans, 2 of which are adults, on one scooter in heavy traffic in the city, right? You know why? Because they're poor.
Yeah.
And so when we compare ourselves, we need to understand we really are. We are rich. And when we begin to think of ourselves as rich, we begin to recognize our blessings. And when we recognize blessing, then we're less likely to be greedy, right? Because we know we're blessed.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the funny part, because you guys know I tell on myself all the time, but whenever I asked Brian to help me out in our group, I was like, Brian, you could actually help me teach this message. He's like, I'd love to. And so he went home, and I sent him my notes, and he was on a business trip, but when he came home, he's sitting there in his house, and he began to see something that he was hoarding.
So when I agreed to do this, I didn't agree to share my dirty laundry with everybody. You know, But I was literally, I opened up my computer. I'd gotten back from being in California, Atlanta somewhere. And so I opened up my computer to start looking at Pastor Jason's notes. And as I'm writing on this subject, right, where we're encouraging people to not hold on to so many things, right? Now we're not saying that people should not have a healthy reserve. In our home, in our home, we have like 6 months to a year's worth of emergency food, right? Just in case there was a big storm or something like that. So we're not trying to tell anybody that we shouldn't have healthy reserves of things, right?
So you're a prepper?
I might be a little bit of a prepper, right? Yeah, there might be a few thousand rounds of ammo there. But anyway, so anyway, hope there's no government people here. So as I'm looking at the notes, I just happened to kind of glance over my shoulder, and I noticed that behind my storage building, which I didn't even look in the storage building, right? Behind my storage building are a bunch of bicycles that have been sitting there that we don't use. They're just rusting, right? And I began to ask myself, why in the world am I holding on to these bicycles that I could bless somebody by directly giving them the bicycles? I could sell the bicycles and use that money to maybe bless somebody else. But they're just sitting there, right? That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. It's holding on to stuff.
And this whole hoarding subject came on because every year we do Love Does, and I don't want to talk about the same things every year. And last year I talked about the 4 loves, and this year I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I was just really trying to figure out what am I going to teach on. You know, I interrupted last week's message with some great news, and this week I got to pick it back up. And my wife was actually sitting there saying how there was a family up the road that didn't really have, you know, or a family nearby that didn't really have. And I said, well, we've got these bedroom sets in our storage unit that we keep saying that we're going to use, but we don't use. And so it kind of frustrated me that I still have bedroom furniture in our storage that we do not use. And it really made me think about how we hoard. We hoard things. You even talk about how whenever the 2x4 thing that you were telling me, how people will, go ahead and share it.
Yeah, well, since we're airing our dirty laundry, maybe everybody else should have to tell us a little bit about what you do. But we were even talking about how, and remember, the whole bottom line of this conversation that we're just having in front of you is centers on breaking this mentality, breaking this mindset of lack, right? And so we were just talking, and I said, yeah, it's like when people go to Lowe's or the lumberyard, and they need a 2x4, so they buy an 8-foot 2x4, but they're doing a 6-foot job, and they cut that 2 extra feet off, and then they hold on to that 2 feet of 2x4 for the rest of their life, right? Thinking someday I might. Now listen, if you're a carpenter or you do woodworking and you keep those pieces because you know you're going to use them, that's different, right? We're talking about the people, don't raise your hand on this one, the people who have something like that and they just hold on to it forever because you never know, I might need that.
Or that shirt, that blouse, ladies, that dress, those shoes. I mean, we've all been there. And then I have a closet full of junk right now that I need to go through. You get so convicted when you talk about things like this. You know, all of us hoard to a degree. We really do. And the whole idea and the reason why we hoard is because we think we won't have later. We're afraid we're going to run out. We're afraid, we live in what ifs. Well, what if this happens? What if this one, I get a hole in it? What if I get a stain? Then I'm going to need that. And you later find out you never did need it. And so you held on to it for all these years. And when you could have actually blessed someone else with it, it's not costing you anything to give it away, but it's really this whole mentality. And so here's what James says. He's pretty harsh. He said, listen, you rich people. He said, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Can you imagine? You're going to just start weeping and wailing because you're getting ready to pay for the way you're acting. He says, your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. Ooh, that's pretty harsh right there. Remember, this is the brother of Jesus. This just isn't one of the followers. This is the brother of Jesus. He said, you have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. How many of you know of a boss, a business owner, that is hoarding all the company money and making you work for minimum wage when they're out there? living up the dream. We know of businesses like that, but we also know of other businesses that will take care of their employees. Here's what he's talking about. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not even opposing you. If you read it in the Message version, it's way worse. It's way worse. I mean, it really puts it on there and really goes after you of what this looks like. You know, we need to understand that rich people are not more loved by God at all, but they are held more responsible. We're held responsible for the way we're managing the money that is not even ours to begin with. God has called us to be a steward, which is a manager of what He's already given us. And what happens is people begin to put their trust in their riches instead of the one who richly blesses them. And I see this all the time in politics. And if you're sitting out here, listen, I'm just speaking the truth. But the truth of the matter is, Christians who don't vote on value, they vote on their pocketbook. So they vote on the person who thinks that they're going to be able to give them what they need. So you being in politics for 12 years and seeing what this looks like, and the great thing about Brian is he has absolutely stood beside us in this district when he was state representative and when he was senator. He's the one that voted and fought for our values as a Christian. And so just talk a little bit about how people, they put their worth in a man. You kind of told a story a little bit about in the Bible about that.
Yeah, I think when people look to government, right, as their source, they're looking at the wrong thing. And it's not only if we look at government, anything that we look at as our source other than God the Father, the creator of the universe, right, means that we're looking in the wrong direction. There's a passage in the Bible, I think most of you are probably familiar with this, and I'll just kind of summarize it, where, Jesus comes upon this crippled man who's waiting by this fountain. And this particular fountain, you probably remember this passage, this particular fountain was one where a certain thing would happen, and then when people would get into the fountain, they would be healed, right? And so Jesus walks up to this crippled man who's by the fountain, and he says, "What do you need?" And this crippled man, I want us all to think about this for just a second. This guy is looking at Jesus Christ. And he says, the crippled man says, "I have no man to put me in the water," right? I'm crippled, and so what I need is a man to put me in the water. Think about that for just a second. He's talking to Jesus Christ. And he says, "I need a man." What was that guy doing? He was putting his attention on the wrong. He had the source right in front of him. The source from which he could have asked anything. And yet he's saying, "I need a man to lift me in the water." That's an example of how we can very easily take our eyes off of the real source. The real source is our Father. Our Father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Yeah. We have the source, which means that we shouldn't always be worried about and holding on to resources, nor should we be looking to man or politics or the government to be our source, because we have the source.
Right, and we pray prayer. We're actually putting all of our trust into our jobs. We're putting trust into our 401ks. And here's the thing. What happens if all that goes away? Now you put all your hope into something that's not guaranteed. The only guarantee we have as Christians is Jesus Christ, who says He'll never leave us, He'll never forsake us. He says He'll always take care of us and supply all our needs according to His riches and glory, not what we think is rich, not what we think we want, but what He sees. And it's crazy. I was talking with somebody the other day that ended up making a major job change, and the wife was praying for the situation. Sometimes we pray for things and we don't always get the prayer answered the way we think it's going to get answered. The way it got answered is he left the job and now he's doing something on his own. And that takes a lot of faith in order to make that step. So she's like, "Okay, I'm in." But the great part about it, his attitude is, "I don't put all my trust into my job or into the company that I was working for or whatever. I put it in God. He's the one who says he's going to take care of me. And that's where we get into this whole thinking all the time that, the reason why I vote off of that, or the reason why I hold on to that, the reason why I do the things I do is because I'm afraid I'm not going to have. And to be honest with you, there are many people, there might be some of you in here that grew up with nothing. You literally grew up poor and you didn't have anything at all. And so therefore, now that you might have a little bit, you begin to hold on to it because you're afraid that you won't have again. And our whole lives, we've been taught, you shared with me, that from the very day that we were born and we could actually understand English, our parents are telling us, we can't afford it, we're broke, you better eat all of that because we won't have. So our whole lives, we've been taught that we are broke and we don't have, and all these different things. And so guess what? Your whole life you've been getting to think that way. And now we still are in that same mentality. Actually, I found that resource people look for loopholes to do less, when really, in reality, people with resources should look for opportunities to do more. But we're trying to find that way out. How do I keep from doing these things? How do I keep from that? And I do want to read. I didn't get to read the Message version in the first group, and I want to read this. It says, "A final word to you arrogant rich. Take some lessons. You'll need buckets for the tears when it comes crashing down upon you. Your money is corrupt and your fine clothes stink. Your greedy luxuries are a cancer in your gut, destroying your life from within. You thought you were piling up wealth. What you've piled up is judgment. All the workers you've exploited and cheated cry out for judgment. The groans of the workers you used and abused are a roar in the ears of the master avenger. You've looted the earth and lived it up, but all you have to show for it is a fatter than usual corpse." You know what that means? You can't take what you earn with you. It's left here for the next person. And usually if you leave a nice inheritance, which I think you should leave something to your family, but at the same time, I think we got to be givers. I think you should take care of your family. There's a lot of people that aren't thinking about that end of it. I want you to know we're not talking about that. I think, back in those days, they weren't thinking that way, but today it's gone the complete opposite. It says, but all you have to show is fatter than usual. In fact, it says, what you've done is condemn and murder perfectly good persons who stand there and take it. James is very frustrated with people that are rich. And we live in a society where we are richly blessed with what we have. The reason we don't feel rich is because we know what everyone else has. And we begin to compare with the neighbor, the Joneses. We keep up with the Joneses. Well, they have a nicer car than we have, so we got to have a nicer car. We're not as rich as they are. And then we begin to think we're poor. And it's this horrible mentality that we take up on ourselves. And I have found, for me personally, I used to be that guy that did not want to give anything. I would go to a party and take my chips and salsa. I'd show up, and at the end of the party, I would go back and look for my chips and salsa to take back with me. I don't care if there were 10 chips in there and a little bit of salsa, 3 cookies. They're going back with me because they were my chips and salsa. Now, I'm like, no, you take it. You keep it. It's a lot different mentality. The cheese dip that I talked about back a long time ago, the guy that wants to split the cheese dip, that was me. A $3 cheese dip, if we went out, I'd have been like, Brian, you're gonna pay for the other half of that cheese dip, and I'll pay for the other half. That's the way my mentality was. And then God really began to speak to me about that I was stingy and greedy. And it's not that I had a lot. That's not the point. The point is what I did have, I wasn't being a giver. And I've realized the more I began to give away, the more I began to, I have things in my storage unit or in my garage when we were cleaning out the storage here. We were just, give that away, give that away. My friend needed a couple deer stands and he was looking to buy them. I could have easily sold them. He was going to buy them. I said, you know what? No, take them. I will never use them. They're just going to stay in storage. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to rust and they're going to rot. So you take them and use them. And that is my mentality today. And I've realized the more I do that, the more God gives. You talk about the reservoir thing that we were sharing, that God doesn't want us to be a reservoir.
Sure. When you think about being stingy and greedy, right? what does the Bible clearly tell us? That as we sow, so shall we reap, right? Whatever it is that we do, we get more of. So if we're being stingy and greedy, that's what we're going to get. The Bible also tells us that, as a man gives, so shall he receive. I mean, the Bible's very, very clear about this. And so when we talk about being a conduit, when Pastor Jason was just now talking about being a reservoir, what we oftentimes do is we act like a reservoir, right? Like a holding space where we're going to keep all this stuff, instead of thinking of ourselves as a conduit or a pipeline through which things can flow, right? So when we live our lives where we are givers, right? Give and it shall be given back to you, good measure, pressed down, shaking over, shall men give unto your bosom, right? The Bible tells us that when we're givers, that we're going to be blessed. Well, if we're holding things rather than giving things away, then we're holding back our own blessings, because the more that we give, the more that we're going to be entrusted with to be able to give away.
Absolutely. We're always looking for opportunities as a church to help people, and not people that walk through the door looking for help. We want to help them as well, but I like being able to find or listen to stories of people that have something go wrong. For instance, over the summer, we saw somebody that their air conditioner went out. Saw it on Facebook, and I said, hey, let's help them. Guess what we did as a church? We went and bought them an air conditioner. Just the other day, we saw somebody have money stolen out of their wallet. That's local here. I don't know who they are, but I saw it on Facebook, and they posted, that's all I had. Now I'm going to struggle doing this. Guess what we did as a church? We went and blessed them. We didn't care what was stolen, how much was stolen. We just said, here's what we can do, and here's what we want to do. This is who we are as a church. We want to be givers. We want to help people, because that's how God works. And my wife and I even look for those opportunities. And when you hold on to things and you don't let go, God could be waiting to bless you with something major in your life, but he's just waiting on you to let go of something. And Brian has a really good story of a young girl that I want him to share that I think is just so absolutely goes perfect along with what we're saying here, because this is a mentality that we carry of not having enough or afraid that we're not going to have it later. And so share the story of the little girl and the pearls.
Sure. So for those of you that want to come and learn more about this, like Pastor Jason said, normally when I say those words, for those of you that want to learn more about this, it's because we're selling a multi-$1,000 class, right? So are we going to do this for free?
Yeah.
We're going to let them come for free?
That's
okay.
what you said, right?
So, I don't know if we agreed to that. We may have to review that contract. But I want to teach you something just real quick, okay? Just real quick. I want you to do what we call a pattern interrupt. Anytime you're trying to learn something important, it's important the way the mind works to every once in a while do what's called a pattern interrupt. And so what that means is to just kind of change something about your physiology. So the easiest thing to do is, most of you right now, you have most of your weight on one butt cheek or the other, right? So maybe just shift, like if you got most of your weight on your left butt cheek, switch it over to the right butt cheek, or vice versa. You're just doing a pattern interrupt, and what that does is it allows the brain to absorb even more, right? Because the mind can only absorb what the butt can endure, and so I want you to just hear this story, this example for what it is. It's about this little girl. She's maybe 4 or 5 years old. She's at the grocery store with her mom. As they're in the checkout line, she sees this strand of pearls, right? And so she gets all excited. She asks her mom, Mommy, can I have these pearls? And the mommy looks at the pearls, and they're like $1.99, right? So that tells you something about the quality of these pearls. But she looks at them and she says, well, now, honey, that's $1.99. You have some money at home, and if you do some extra chores and things like that, you could earn a little more money, and then your birthday's coming up, so Grandma may very well give you another $1 or something like that. And so I bet you'll be able to get those pearls on your own. The little girl says, okay. So she goes home, and she starts doing extra chores. She goes to the neighbor's house and asks if she can do some stuff over there for a little bit of money, et cetera, et cetera. A little time goes by. Her birthday comes along, and sure enough, the grandma gives her another $1. And so now the girl has enough for the $1.99 pearls. So they go back to the store. They buy these cheap imitation pearls, and the little girl puts them on. They make her feel pretty. They make her feel grown up. She loves her pearls. She just loves them, right? And so her daddy, every night when she's getting ready for bed, her daddy comes in and reads her a bedtime story. He gets done reading her the story one night, and he says, "Do you love me?" She says, "Well, yeah, Daddy, you know I love you." He says, "Well, give me your pearls." She says, "Well, no, Daddy, not my pearls. How about this stuffed animal? I love this stuffed animal. I'll give that to you." He says, "No, that's okay, that's okay." He gives her a little kiss and goes on about his business. So they do this for about 2 or 3 different nights, and each time the little girl is like, "Oh, no, Daddy, not my pearls," and offers him something else. So finally, after a while, he comes into her room one night, and she's sitting there on the bed, and he can see that she's crying. And he says, "What's the matter, honey?" And without looking up, she just lifts up her hand to her father, and when she opens it up, there's the cheap dime store pearls. So her daddy, with a little tear in his own eye, reaches down to take those pearls from her, while with the other hand, he's reaching into his pocket to get the real pearls, the genuine pearls that he had had all along, that he had just been waiting for her to give up the cheap imitation that she had so that he could give her the real thing. And you know what? My father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We're not talking about name it and claim it theology here. Right. We're talking about where the truth of the Bible actually agrees with the science of man, how we understand the human brain to operate. And so I would just encourage everybody to just maybe think about the things that we're just holding a little too tight to.
Yep.
That maybe we need to give up so that we can get even more.
Yeah, we don't know what God has for us if we would just trust him and let go of that one thing or multiple things in our life that is allowing us to be hoarders, allowing us to have the broke thinking. And when God is sitting here saying, "I've got all of this, I'm ready to release your way," if you would just let it go. We tell parents, they'll say, "Oh, my kids are great. They share. We don't have no problem sharing and this." I say, "Well, let's test them. Let's just test your kids. You want to know how well your kids do? I'll give you a test today to try later. Give them something or let them have something and ask them for some of it. Can I have that?" And if they say no, then you got work to do. Because most kids don't want to give up, especially if they earn it on their own. When they earn it on their own and they have to pay for it, parents, when your kids are at your house and they're using all your electric and then they get their own house and you go to their house like, "Dad, shut that light off." "Oh, really?" Now you want the light to be shut off.
I do that on purpose to my adult kids. I go in their house and turn on all the lights and leave them on.
Go in their fridge, eat all their food. So my kids, obviously 2 of our kids are out of the house, and Zoe, every once in a while, she'll buy something of her own, and she hides it. And she had some cookie dough in the refrigerator one day, and I ate one thing of cookie dough. And I got a family thread text, "Who ate the cookie dough?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't." And then I thought she meant all of it. She was only meaning one little sliver of it. And I'm like, "Well, that was me, but for goodness sakes, there's still 5 slices left." It's funny when you buy it on your own how it looks. So if something's given to you, it's easier to give it away. But when you earn it, it's harder to let go of it. And that's how we all are. We all are earning everything we have. But guess what? God's the one that gave it to you to begin with. He's the one that gave it to you. And so what I want to do is I want to challenge you. We have these little tokens that the ushers are going to be at the doors with. I want you to take several of these. And every year we do this. And this is kind of like a Joy FM. I forget what they call that. You got Joyed or whatever. That's kind of what this is like. And this is the Thanksgiving season. We're all usually we become very giving during this time of year. They say after Thanksgiving, that's when most people are the most giving is actually after Thanksgiving. I don't know why that is, but again, it could be something scientific. But what I want you to do is take one of these things, and wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. If you're getting a haircut, if you're in the store, you're in Starbucks, you're at the gas station, what I encourage you to do is do something for somebody. Pick up the tab in a restaurant. Pay for their gas. Pay for their haircut. Pay for their grocery bill. Do something out of the ordinary and give them one of these tokens and just let them know that they're loved, because that's what Jesus does. We are to show love towards people. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to activate that giving spirit that we should all be having all year round, that it really shouldn't just happen during Thanksgiving, but it should be all the time. What's going to happen is if we can get rid of the mentality of being broke or not having enough and trusting God for everything else. We got to trust God for wherever you are. And I know it's not easy, but again, you're speaking, I'm somebody talking to you that has been there. I've been at the very bottom of the rung financially of not having with my own family. And I know what it's like, and I know how God works when you have the attitude of giving. And so I'm only speaking from my experience. And James is saying, listen, let's not let what we have rot and corrode. Let's give it away. If you've got something that you're hoarding, give it away, and let's bless somebody else with it, whatever that may be. So this Thanksgiving, take these tokens, and let's bless other people that God lays on your heart. And let's be the hands and feet of Jesus, okay? Let's pray. Father God, we honor you today. We thank you for who you are. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your brother who is frustrated because he knows what you want us to do, who are richly blessed. And God, we just want to honor you today. We want to thank you for everything that you've given us. And we want to begin to have this mentality of that we are rich, that we don't want to have the mentality of having lack of or what if, that God, you own everything. And because of you, you're going to take care of your children. And we're going to honor you in that by being givers and having a heart of generosity. We honor you. We thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for joining us online for today's message. If God is impacting your life through this ministry, join us in reaching others by partnering with us today. You can give at myrootschurch.com/giving, or you can click the giving tab below. Be sure to join us next week at 10 or 11:30 a.m. See you next time.